Do you like free stuff? Of course you do. As we bring new and exciting guests on the show, they're cluing us in all the time to all the cool stuff that they've been making. Games, swag, you name it. This is our chance to share it with you. So why would we keep it to ourselves? This is why we're launching the Cheat Codes giveaways. Consider it a thank you for all of your loyal listening. Each week we will announce a featured game or an item on the show, and we will then give one or more of these said prizes away to lucky listeners. It's as easy as retweeting the episode on Twitter, following us on SoundCloud or Facebook. Plus, there's always a bunch more ways to get in on the action and increase your chances of winning. You can hit up the giveaways page at our website, cheatcodespodcast.com, to see what's being offered, how you can enter, and all the fine print if that's your sort of thing. So hop on over to check it out. Now go get your mitts on some free stuff, courtesy of all of us here at Cheat Codes.
Rules and regulations apply and are subject to change. There is no purchase necessary to enter. You must be 18 years of age and a U.S. citizen to qualify. Please visit cheatcodespodcast.com for more information on this offer. I'm a fluffy little bunny.
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have, we lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of, Ilsa. I'm no good at being noble. But it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. Here's looking at you, Cheat Codes. It's February 11th, 2016. Welcome to episode 84 of the Cheat Codes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We're really glad you're here. The next hour is us drinking a few beers and going over our favorite bits from the past week in video game news, and sometimes we throw a sprinkling of tech and pop culture in for good measure. My name is Joe Erskine. I am your host, and we're coming to you from the foggy tarmac of a Moroccan airfield. I'm here with Cheat Codes producer and editor, Mr. Joe Ilsa Arroyo.
Hey.
Cheat Codes contributor, Mr. Nick Victor Laszlo Golish.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're welcoming prolific game writer and consultant, Mr. Rob Play It Again Sam Otten.
Hey, guys.
And thank you for being here, sir. Today on the show, we're going to begin with some beautiful friendships with the following main topics. The FBI made a video game about dissuading youth from radical extremism. And Peter Molyneux has some thoughts on the value of crunch, and you may or may not agree. And Namco is offering $10,000 to anyone who can explain the story of Dark Souls. For today's lightning round, we're going to try and stay one step ahead of the Nazis to get to the following bits. An op-ed says the PC gamers are getting short shrift compared to console gamers when it comes to ports. Apparently the PC master race is feeling a bit subjugated, guys. And finally, we'll consider which is the more desirable career track as an NFL athlete or perhaps a pro esports athlete. Yeah. So, Mr. Otten, thank you for being with us, sir. We certainly appreciate it. If you would be so kind, can you run down a quick list of the stuff that you've worked on? And maybe regale us with a peek of what you're working on now, if possible, or a,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I got started working on game stuff, about 15 years ago. Did some projects for Ubisoft, Rainbow Six 3 on the Xbox, first Far Cry, a little number called Rolling on Dubs that became 187 Ride or Die. It's a particularly proud moment there. And then spent a couple years working at Fox, sort of helping maintain the excellence of their licensed game portfolio, and worked on some stuff like Avatar and Aliens and some stuff like Alvin and the Chipmunks and Jumper, the movie, the game.
Hayden Christensen.
And then since then, more recently, I've been working with my friend Tom, writing some games. Did Gears of War Judgment, did Battlefield Hardline, did a lot of the games with the word after the colon, managing Ethan Carter. And I've spent the last couple years doing a couple things. The one that I can talk about is some stuff for Disney working on toys. They had a product called Playmation that came out this past Christmas, and I spent a good amount of time working with those dudes on trying to make that fun and working with kids and working with hardware and a bunch of new interesting challenges for me. So yeah, it's been keeping me busy.
That sounds prolific.
Yeah,
as I previously stated. Oh, that's awesome, dude.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So you're busy. You're busy, basically. That's good.
A little bit. little bit.
Well, we appreciate it, man. Thank you for being here. Before we get on with the main course of the show, let's talk about what we're washing it down with real quick. Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, you walked into ours, folks. So we like to kick back with a few beers while we suss out the past week in news. So kick back and join us. Today we're enjoying some Pig War White IPA from the folks at Hub in Portland, Oregon. You know, Casablanca, White IPA. There's a connection there, I think. Just don't bogart all of it, guys. Hey-o. Yeah. All right, so we got plenty to talk about today. Let's do this damn thing. First and foremost, Steve Rose wrote a piece over at The Guardian showcasing the release of Slippery Slope. Just about every other gaming news outlet jumped all over it as well. You play a goat, and contextually speaking, it's a weird thing about anti-extremism, radicalism, whatever you want to say. The FBI made it, so draw your own conclusions. It's pretty unplayable, maybe not so fun, but neither is radicalism, unless you're the radical, I guess, right? Yeah. So...
it's full of dad jokes this episode.
We spent... Well, that's what I'm good at. I'm a dad. What... Initial thoughts? We spent a couple of minutes playing this today, or watching Joe get angry while playing it, and I don't know. Why is the FBI making games? Is this just like a propaganda move? Like, what
Did you learn
here?
something?
Okay, well, so hold up. So first of all, you guys need to learn how to do your research. Not only did I play the game to its completion, I played the website through completion. I got the extremism education certificate that I put my name on and printed out. So I mean, I actually kind of felt a little bit down the rabbit hole with this thing. This is a clear example of the government grant process at work, right? I mean,
Totally.
I'm sure somebody well-intentioned said, pitched. There was an RFP goes out. A company says, "Oh yeah, we have the skills and people to solve that problem." They put something together. They're probably take the money and spend it on something else, which is, a consistent problem with government awards. And it's a bummer because it's, this is what our taxes go to. I think the intentions are interesting. I think the kind of product market fit, so to speak, is a little bit off. It's a really weird thing that they made, but they made it. But the game is way easier once you realize that, if you just tap the arrow keys left and right, that the character will just sit inside of one individual column or slot and not move. Whereas when you first play the game, it feels like you're trying to weight it, the amount of pressing should be kind of indicate the acceleration. That's all a lie. It's all a lie.
You're on notice, FBI. You're on notice. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's both the secret of the game and of the website and of the product. But it's an interesting little thing that they made. Yeah, but I can just imagine somebody writing a grant kind of, put a game in it. We're sure to get the grant if we put a game in it. It's for teenagers. And I think that's probably the problem.
Okay. Well said. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, well, that is the problem at its core is assuming that because it's called a game that actually makes it a game that someone would want to play. They miss that part of the distinction where there are good and bad games.
Right.
They forgot about that part, where in order to drive people to play it can't suck ass, and it does.
The whole goat thing is weird, but then there's that whole other thing with trying to free the puppet. But you have to free 5 puppets to free the
what was
one
with
puppet?
freeing the one puppet and then backing out and finding out there's another master puppet that you only free by freeing other puppets?
So I think what it is I think there's supposed to be one puppet, but they just didn't do a really good job updating the graphics. But the idea, I think, is that you're freeing each limb of the puppet until the puppet is, totally free, like Chucky free or something like that.
We've deprogrammed your potential, radicalism using an articulated draw model made of balsa wood.
It's weird because it's so my assumption was that this website was supposed to be something that was supposed to be part of a curriculum that it wasn't something that you would want to do or that you would do because it was fun. It would be hey, high school student, we're gonna all take 45 minutes today, and rather than do pages 152 through 168 of our social studies textbook, we're going to actually talk about this thing and, use the web or we'll go to the computer lab and fill out this stuff. Or, there's just, because it's so made, the user experience is so polished to be unfun You know what I mean? Like, there's other things in there where you have to kind of associate concepts with like phrases, and it's like, you know, it'll be like anger or destructive or something like that. And the phrases and the descriptions and the words are so impossibly similar to one another that there's no way in hell that like you would have ever. Like, it's not something you can get right. Like, it's like the ultimate trick question is discerning, like, the difference between, like, you know, two very, very similar kinds of extractions. Like,
Yeah.
So it's clearly, like, something that people would have to do, not something that other than me, that people would opt to do. I just kind of found it strangely fascinating.
I agree with you. Yeah. There was that whole comment about it being, like, the worst educational video game ever made. Or something along those lines.
That's
I'm paraphrasing.
probably a stretch, by the way.
I'm just.
I think that's a little bit hyperbolic. Like, you know, edutainment is notoriously it's also two things. It's hard. It's really difficult to make something that's like, you know, where there's assessment criteria at the end of it, and you're like, oh yeah, I had fun and I proved that I learned something. It's like, no, you probably, you know, either knew it or didn't have fun.
Or you figured out the mechanics enough to game the system to just get to the end.
Yeah. Or you're good at taking tests or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, I didn't read a lot of this stuff, and I took all the quizzes, and I got all the quizzes. You know, I mean, it's the kind of thing where everything's always all of the above. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, which of these things, the bad one, the terrible one, or the awful one, or D, all of the above is described in this, and you're like, yeah, pretty sure that's yeah. You know, it definitely wasn't made with care. Right.
Well, they also failed to do the part where you actually are in any way penalized for making the wrong choice or have to maybe read more when you don't do it. You can just keep dragging the black box over this other white box, and eventually it'll be like, that was right.
Right. Well, like you said, cool. You said it out loud, Joe, when you were playing earlier. It's like, oh, so I just
this could be 5 of them.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you make all the boxes turn white, and I can move on. Like, I don't care about the content. You know what I mean? Like, clearly the mechanic here is simple. You know what I mean? And even then, there is no end condition, like end game condition. Like, you basically free him, and he's just standing there, and you're still looking at that underground bunker, kind of like wondering what's next. So,
you get a certificate.
You get the certificate. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I guess that's fair. But
yeah, I mean, I was pretty stoked about that.
Did you print it out?
I did print it out.
Nice.
I did. I was visiting a friend of mine today, and I meant to give it to him to put. He's like, oh yeah, I saved you a desk in my office, so you can come in and just have a desk whenever you want. I was going to hang that over my desk, which I will still do. I just neglected to bring it with me today.
You gonna get it framed?
Yeah, you got to frame it.
Yeah, like right next to the diploma.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's probably for the best because I really wasn't giving it sort of the treatment that it deserves.
What kind of treatment does it deserve? Is my question.
Gilded frame, maybe.
Right. Something very Rococo and Baroque, you know.
This is a friend who does some like kind of government-y type stuff and goes to like weird spooky conferences and bunkers and things like that. So I thought that I would kind of, be like asserting myself if I'm gonna hang out in your office, like I want you to know, like, I'm down too. Like
right. I got cred. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
I'm just curious if like the certificate exempts me from like terrorist watch lists or anything.
So if I
get it, he took. I don't need to be.
Test, yeah. I'd be happy with like a TSA pre-check. Like I don't have to take my shoes off while I'm waiting to get on a flight. That sounds good.
If I present my certificate,
right. Yeah.
I like it.
This is all right.
That's not so bad. It reminds me of the Army came out with a game a while ago when I was back in the Air Force. I think it was called like This Nation's Army or This World's Army.
I think it's America's Army.
America's Army, yeah.
America's Army, yeah, totally.
And that I think was a lot better than this. I didn't play a whole lot of it, but it was also one of those weird government games, I guess, where they.
No, I mean, America's Army is actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
There's also things like Full Spectrum Warrior, which started as a government project, and then kind of became. It's probably one of the few times that something became a commercial game that had those origins. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, America's Army was kind of like a there was some kind of multiplayer virtual worldy aspect to it, but I think, if I remember correctly, I know some people that worked on it. I mean, it's essentially a recruitment tool, right? But it was, I mean, Michael Bay does all those commercials for a reason. You know what I mean? Like,
I just remember. I remember playing it, and I think the first thing I did in the game was I was in like a classroom learning about different things. Like I was actually in the game instead of shooting, like you would think in like a first-person shooter. I was like learning curriculum inside of a classroom, like you would actually in the Army. So it's like
right. There's some sort of
there's going to be tests later.
Immersion.
yeah. Right. So here's before we move on though, in the next minute or two, my question is this though, like. So you brought up America's Army, and then we have examples in the past like couple of years where like GTA is kind of like got co-opted by ISIS to use it as a recruitment tool as well. We saw Arma 3 kind of get injected with jihadist player models, and we've seen kind of examples where this. But like, so our response to prevent them from doing these kind of things or to like fight against it is to create our own versions of these things.
Well, so like that would only be true if the government was modding other games currently to be pro.
That's fair. That's fair. But like the best way to fight propaganda is with our own propaganda.
I would agree with that.
Propaganda about the dangers of propaganda.
Right.
Probably.
Okay.
Which they literally talk about in the experience.
Yes, they did. Yep.
It was the most confusing thing about it was there was that comment like directly from, I don't know if you have the quote here, you probably don't, but I'll try and rephrase it as much as I remember.
Yeah,
when they explained it, they actually said that the goal is so that after a child or a teenager has gone through this thing, then they'll always think twice about the idea of what is being taught to them. And then I'm like, well, but you delivered it in a mechanism that did exactly that. So how is that different than the extremists like games and stuff?
It might be effective. I mean, you know what I mean? In kind of a weird way. I mean, I think the lessons aren't something. I mean, they're kind of like critical thinking lessons. That I'm sorry, this isn't like the most hilarious, sidebar. But I mean, critical thinking in that kind of regard isn't necessarily well articulated by curricula. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like the lesson that you're supposed to learn when you read between the lines of history, but it's not the facts of like what happened on this day in history. So I mean, I think there's some value in that, just as a message. But it's definitely, hard to. It's hard not to see the kind of irony of a pseudo game about propaganda warning you about the dangers of propaganda.
Right?
It's hard to not be cynical about it. I guess I would say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of this like if I was in like third grade and I played this game. It's like, would I take it as something really meaningful, or would it be like one of those things like, oh, don't talk to that stranger in the van that's trying to pick you up? If like this is the same type of message, like I don't know, it's one of those things.
Good advice, kids.
I'm just saying, like when you were that young, those are the things they taught you, and that sticks with you as you grow up for some reason. I don't know, like don't get into strangers' buses. Like maybe as a third grader, if they played this and they could understand what they're reading, it would stick with them also. Like don't like understand that it may be propaganda instead of, I don't know, something that you actually believe in. Maybe
let's just hope that the Minecraft education tools and stuff that are coming out right now can be better utilized to teach similar lessons without terrible goat acceleration control.
Well, and this is my thing too. Like, and before we move on, but like, so Obama announced his like $4 billion initiative to like bring computer science to schools as part of like a like normal curriculum throughout like like nationwide for public and private schools. I kind of wish they'd spent a little bit of that money before giving it back to these schools on this game, just to kind of make it a little bit better.
Final question, actually. Does anyone in the panel currently know how much money or grant money or whatever was spent to actually create this piece of software?
I do not actually.
You probably can look it up.
Yeah, I imagine that there's a place that it's listed. I would be curious.
I didn't think about it until now, but now it's like all I'm thinking about, because
how much
I want to know. I want to know, what does it cost?
How much
to make
did we
this
pay
drivel?
for this piece of shit? Yeah.
Well, you don't think they spent $1 million on a hammer or a toilet seat?
Independence Day reference, guys. Good job. Anyway, all right.
Give it a cold.
So, Peter Molyneux, I think everybody who listens to this show and everybody sitting at this table, and probably you too, Rob, everybody's aware that Mr. Molyneux, one of the, I would dare say a legendary game designer.
Sure.
Oft ridiculed and press silent, yet legendary in his own right, continues his embargo on doing press, but was recently quoted saying that he was a staunch believer in crunch periods of game development. Crunch, for those who don't know, are periods of time, sporadic and or lengthy, that leave developers working on a game for insane hours, sometimes in rough conditions that can have severe effects on their personal lives, all for the sake of shipping a game, hopefully on budget, on time, and in working order. It's a dirty word in the industry for sure, I think, and many rail against it, but many see it as a necessary evil, sort of like energy drinks. So, based on the article, is he right? Is he wrong? Or is it's not that simple? Obviously, right? Like that's where we start with this because I think he is kind of right, but he's also kind of wrong.
I think to bring back Independence Day, I really liked what he said about like, when humanity's down on its worst or something, they get together and they get the job done or something. And I kind of liked that viewpoint of it, but I'm still not sure I'm a fan of crunch, I guess.
But that's okay. So I agree with you to that extent. But why is it that we have to get to the point where we're at we're up against the wall to get something done? Like, why can't we plan and budget and do all these things appropriately? And I'm not naive enough to say that, like, there are things that come up that affect game development and everything like that. I get that. And I think everybody who's in the industry or is interested in it needs to know about it and has experienced it to some degree or another. But, like, as much as we want to be hopeful in the sense that, like, when we're under this insane amount of pressure to get something done, sometimes that brings the best out of us. Like, why do we have to get to that point in the first place?
Yeah. Are you familiar? Is everyone here familiar with Parkinson's law?
No.
Yeah.
Explain it to me.
It's a law that basically states that any project you ever do will always consume the duration of the time period and expand as such to whatever time period you're given for it.
There you go.
So if you say, like, you could go to a publisher, right, and make a 2-year deal, and it might seem like it's crazy, but you can maybe pull it off. That same deal done 4 years is still going to lead to the same crunch, and it's going to create not necessarily the same quality game, but whatever that game is, you're going to find a way to expand it into that time frame, meaning it always will come down to the last minute in some respect. You can't avoid the possibility of our nature to procrastinate. And same thing is true. Think about going through college. Your teacher extends the deadline, and you're like, 4 hour lunch. Like, that's just
right. It's an organism that expands to fit its constraints, essentially. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I like the idea that maybe crunch does bring out the best, but I also like the idea of trying to avoid it as much as possible. So, Rob, tell me a story. Tell me a story about when you were on any one number of the various gigs that you were working on, when you were faced with a similar kind of like crunch thing, and what did you get out of it? Like, how do you feel about crunch in general?
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, I'm assuming what Peter meant was that crunch is, kind of exactly as you guys phrased it, is okay for a period. You know what I mean? I've been on projects that have crunched when it made no sense to crunch. I've been on projects that have crunched for more time than was necessary to crunch. And sometimes it's because a project manager, or producer, or lead, or executive, or somebody feels like I've been in situations where I've heard people say, I feel like the team needs to crunch, because there is, I think, something that kind of buoys the collective spirit in that, okay, well, shit, we're all going to be here for a while. I think some of the best teams I've worked with, hardly have to do it at all. But I do think that, yeah, I mean, it's, for me, I kind of like it. I mean, I'm like, I call it going to war. I'm like, I'm ready to go to war. Let's do this. Like 20-hour days for a week or for 2 weeks or whatever it is. Like, get things done, like sit in a room, make decisions, bang it out. I love that. The thing that I hate about game development more than anything is those kind of what Tom Bissell always calls the horse latitudes, where you're just there and you're not sure why you're there or how you can be helpful, and you feel like the list of things that you're waiting on, is just getting longer and longer and longer. And, at the same time, people want to record stuff, or the actors want to do some things, and, and it's stuff you're doing work that is going to be redone. So, I mean, I would much rather crunch, get in, break things, get out, than sit and sort of drift.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, and I think all of us have been in some situation where development has become something where it can be that kind of ebb and flow, where there are times when you're sitting around on your ass, kind of wondering what to do. At the same time, it becomes like when you're finally in it, like you kind of resent the shit out of it, and you're sweating your brains out, and you're not to use that horrible reference of like developers sleeping under their desks or whatever, God forbid, but it happens from time to time. But when it's over and you kind of look back and you see the cool thing, and if you get it out and you get it done, you're super proud and you're super amped. Like there's that adrenaline pumping, and you get that Stockholm syndrome a little bit, where it's kind of like if it's not happening, you kind of miss it. You know what I mean?
Depends on how you look at it, I think, or it depends on the type of crunch that it actually is, and that's where you run into this really big problem of you have to define it first before you can actually say whether or not it's good or bad, and nobody's capable of defining what crunch actually is because they all have different ideas of what it is. I don't know about you, but I remember when I was a kid, there used to be these overnight pizza parties, and they'd always be at these like game places, like
arcades or whatever,
like Peter Piper Pizza or like places like that. And I had no idea that was going to happen again as an adult. And now I know that basically crunch is just like a big sleepover pizza party where you get shit done. That's cool.
Minus the pizza.
No.
Add the work.
No, it's usually like, here's a bunch of pizza, guys. Keep fucking working.
Right, yeah. Don't leave to go eat. Stay here and do work. Yeah,
right.
That kind of thing.
I guess,
go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I guess most of the experience that I've had with crunch has usually been, like, before milestones, which I think makes sense.
Right,
or, like, right at the end of the project. But, I don't know if I can give like a fair assessment of it because I think a lot of the problems that people have with crunch is like how it affects your life outside of the crunch. Like if I were a father and I'm not able to come home for a week or something because I'm at work 20 hours a day for a week, I feel like that's a much bigger problem. And maybe he's enjoying the crunch and he's having a lot of fun. He's getting a lot of stuff done. But
meanwhile
everything
his wife
else in his life is suffering.
Yeah. Meanwhile, his wife is like pulling her hair out or something, like drowning the kid, and then they're like,
"Wow, we took it. That escalated quickly."
I was gonna say, damn,
like,
dude,
is crunch really a good thing for that? Then, like, I don't know. Like,
well, let's talk about the different types of crunch. I've heard of the crunch culture at certain studios is a defined crunch. That to me, I think a defined crunch is worth it. Where you're going to hit those points where you need to meet a milestone. So somebody's got to do the work, right? That's the first problem, right? But defined crunch is something where it's like, look, we know we're going to work more. So how much more? This much more, right? You're going to come in for this many weeks for this many more hours. You're going to go home and you're going to have late nights, Monday through whatever. And a lot of studios will actually say like Friday is the cutoff point for the crunch. And even if they're in the middle of it, like you get to go home Friday at a reasonable time and actually have the entire weekend with your family. And to me, that seems like kind of like a way of managing it so that it doesn't feel like it's never ending. Because people look at it more of like whenever we get it done, then it's finished.
Right.
Like this crunch does not finish until we accomplish whatever the goals were. That's when it starts to be like, oh my God, I'll just bring the pillow to work and just crawl under my desk and fucking.
No, absolutely. Like so this is actually like what your point, Nick, is something that I'm concerned about as I'm on the job hunt here, looking for some sort of studio job or even any job where it's kind of like. I'm familiar with what the culture is like, and I understand that there's a lot of, gung-ho kind of attitude and to try to get things done. And people get passionate, man. People don't mind putting down 20-hour days if there's something they're working on. They're having a lot of fun. That makes total sense to me, and that's kind of like where some of the, a lot of times a lot of good work can come out of things like that. However, like I have a son and I have a wife, and I value the time that I have with them. You know what I mean? And work-life balance is a real fucking thing. And I want to try and achieve that as best as possible by still getting my work done and doing a good job, but also being a good father and a good husband. You know what I mean? So when people talk about crunch, I get a little bit of like a cold, feeling or a pit in my stomach because I'm like, all right, now I need to go home and have this conversation with my wife where it's like, you're not going to see me for 2+ weeks or more or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's...
But if you had a structured crunch,
I think I actually dread that conversation more than the actual crunch itself.
But what if you had a structured crunch, like I was just mentioning previously?
Like these sprints, quote unquote, that they talk about. Yeah.
Well, even if they call it a crunch or whatever, I mean, just the idea that it's like, look, I'm going to be working super late, but I'll be back on Friday, and nobody's going to call me in on the weekend because that's what we have decided before we went into this. Like, maybe you should be more receptive, and that feels a little bit. It still sucks. I mean, I'm not. That's why I'm, presenting it as such.
But it's maybe the best and worst of both worlds. I don't know. But Rob, longest crunch you were ever on? What was like? How long did it go?
Oh, jeez. I did like 10 a.m. to 3 a.m. 7 days a week for 3 weeks once. Pretty much.
Okay.
That sounds pretty fucking brutal, dude.
It was fine. it was actually totally fine.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, it was just, there was a lot of voice recording happening, and it was just the voice director and I who was, doing a lot of the writing. wouldn't get around to talking through the script for what was being recorded the next day until like midnight. So, it was just a function of like, get all the actual, kind of work stuff done. Then let's talk through the scripts. And then suddenly, and of course, like rewrite everything because that's what you do. and then it's just like, oh my God, it's 3 a.m. and I need to, I should be back in the office. And it, I mean, I have somehow convinced a very lovely young woman to share a home with me, and she weathered it okay. But we don't have kids, and I think it's just a totally different equation for people that do. So I was able to do it, and I was happy to do it, but yeah, I can imagine it being really hard for somebody else.
Right. No, I think those stories that you hear, like the worst case scenarios of horrible crunch, and even in the worst circumstances, become kind of like the benchmark. Like when in any article or story you hear about crunch, like that's the stuff that gets referenced. You know what I mean? But like, I mean, crunch is a real thing, and it maybe it shouldn't be such a dirty word, but it kind of is, and there are ways to do it. Maybe it's like It's like radicalism, guys. There are responsible ways to do it, and sometimes not. You know what I mean?
Well, a lot of it's like a lot of it's dependent on the team. I mean,
yeah,
the reason I've seen crunch that's, I mean, like I turn into a total asshole in some of these situations where if there's somebody who's not pulling their weight, and I feel bad having done this, I will kind of go to the producer and be like, let's put so-and-so by the window, or don't let that person touch code, because it's just, the people that are jamming and who are the ones who are actually working really hard and the ones who are staying late to get things done right. You have some people who are well-intentioned, but at the same time kind of just can't keep up with that pace. It's sort of like, okay, you're in the bus or you're out, man. I mean,
yeah, right. That's what you do. You take that person and you're like, hey, we haven't updated our WordPress in a while. You should really go over there and take care of that.
Right.
And you feel terrible. I mean, like, but it's at the same time, it's sort of, you're like, well, maybe, the problem is that, we don't have enough really amazing, T-shaped people who are able to adapt under pressure, and that the lack of those people is kind of what put us in this mess to begin with. I mean, because game development's tough because nobody likes, it's supposed to be a fun industry. So nobody likes kind of, or very few people like kind of telling people to shut up and get their jobs done. You know what I mean? When you see somebody like playing ping pong or something like that, it's not the kind of vibe where you're like, dude, your ping pong game is, is going to cost the whole team, a night away from their families. You know what I mean? But in some ways, that's kind of like, it's sort of true. I'm not saying like playing ping pong and letting off some steam is the problem, but it's just, the schedules are based on such, I mean, it's like trying to estimate how much money you're going to make, running your small business next year. Like you just can't. Like there's no, you can come up with assumptions and reasons why you're going to be able to make this product in this amount of time, but you cannot, under any circumstances, know definitively what is going to happen over the next 52 weeks. Well, you're running a team of hundreds of people in 3 studios in 8 countries. Like it's just somehow there's more countries than studios. But
3 studios in 8 countries.
You can't know what these things are, and the things that ruin all these assumptions are just, we assume a level of efficiency for the people who report to us because we want them to be efficient and hardworking and all these things, but we also don't take them to task when they're not.
My biggest takeaway earlier, you said the game industry is supposed to be fun. Now I didn't hear you say it was fun. So I would elaborate.
I think Go ahead.
I think it is fun, and I think making games is one of the most kind of interesting. I think it's one of the most interesting things that somebody can do, and I think it's a popular art form that is still kind of still in the process of being born, even though it doesn't really feel like it all the time.
I agree. Yeah.
So from if you're intellectually curious and especially about play, I mean, you should be making games, or working on related technology or thinking about the way that people, what they do and what they're for. At the same time, like it's gone through a shift in the last 10 years, my 13, 15 years of having worked on them. Like I definitely see companies and studios go from kind of saying like, man, we just want to make the game that, you know, we all feel passionate about, to, you know, there's sort of what's called the blockbuster mentality, and I'm sure this is news to none of you or your listeners, so I'll try to be brief. But, like, you know, people are saying, like, these things are really expensive to make, and they are significantly more expensive on a SKU by SKU basis than they used to be. So therefore, we have to play a little bit safer, because a miss is a much bigger miss, and, you know, these are all companies that have shareholders. So
sure,
it makes it hard when you're on a team, and, you know, I know teams who have worked for years on original IP and then been handed something, and they're like, oh no, now we're not going to make your game, you're going to make this. And this may be totally awesome, but it's really hard to get a team, like, that can just happen. You know what I mean? Like, a blink of an eye, your 3 years of labor just all go away, and you're saying, like, hey, we want you to make this thing that, you know, we've decided, the powers that be have decided that you're going to make. And you know, teams used to be, you know, there were a lot more independent teams back in the day, and, you know, old man talking now. But I mean, like, there were a lot more independent teams. They were smaller, cheaper, faster, easier to run, you know, quicker to experiment. And so, I mean, you know, my thing is, I really hope that, like, and one of the powerful things that is happening right now is tools are getting so much better. And I think that, you know, it will be a lot more fun when those tools get better, and when there's people who are able to kind of make the equivalent of, like, the Easy Rider with a small team. And that's happening, you know. I mean, Firewatch is a great example of, like, you know, a polished, like this week's Firewatch,
right?
A polished experience that, independent of the fact that it's, like, narrative driven, that looks, everybody can't stop talking about how beautiful the game looks. And, you know, teams of, like, a handful, you know, fewer than a dozen people aren't typically associated with making, you know, beautiful, like, point for point gorgeous against, like, you know, the $80 million AAA franchise title game. And that's starting to change, and I think that will make things a lot more fun again. I think it'll also make things a lot more competitive again, which is terrific, because it's been pretty siloed for, you know, since like 2008 pretty much.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think, real quick, Joe, sorry, and I think you hit the nail on the head as far as, like, with the tools becoming you know, more accessible, more available, you know, to the point where, like, I mean, we just saw Amazon release their game engine for free this week. And we also saw, I mean, we've seen Unreal and Unity, you know, do that as well. But you know, more and more all the time, like, it's going the way of the music industry, where it's becoming something about the people, and it's gonna go through this whole, like, reorg, like, seismic shift before it kind of, like, rebalances itself, if it ever does. You know what I mean? Who cares? But point is, people are going to be generating.
It will.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt. I think it will.
Right on. I get my point is that, like, more and more people are getting their hands on stuff, and making more and more stuff, and that's always just a good thing, in my opinion. You know,
and right now, fans of just, you know, people who have been gaming, like, since you know, since the Nintendo and stuff, need to hang in there just a little bit, because we're in this nice little shift where people are wondering, like, where are all the original games, and that's not necessarily true right now, but people ask that question a lot with AAA titles, and that goes back on what Rob was saying about a miss is a big miss for them, so they can't really take those risks. But now that the tools have evolved, there are a lot more games that can actually come out that are they've been there for so long.
A long time.
Yeah, and there are these games that are totally original, and they're there. So if you're a fan of them, don't worry. Like, we're shifting, and eventually, like, it'll be normal to experience very different things in games than just the same first-person shooter.
You get stuff like Undertale and Game Maker of all things.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like, holy shit, you know? So, anyway. All right, we got to move on. All right, topic number 3, and then we'll take a quick break. But we've all had some exposure to the Dark Souls franchise. Namco, From Software, all that stuff. Whether you play Demon Souls as the original iteration, or Dark Souls 1 and 2 and subsequent expansions. I'm actually going to leave Bloodborne out of this.
Okay.
We've been talking a lot about it lately. Let's just put it by the side for now. Whether it be the punishing mechanics and gameplay, or the amount of coverage that the series has received over the years, one thread remains true regardless, and that's that the story is presented in a way that allows for either complete dismissal or very, very deep theorizing. Namco held a contest recently for fans to submit their theories, with a $10,000 prize to the one they deemed the best, I guess. It ended a few days ago, and as of the time of this recording, a winner has yet to be announced. However, I'm using this as a basic thing. It's great. We all know about Dark Souls. You die a lot. There's some really great character design.
That's the story, right?
Sweet fucking enemies and bosses that are really hard. It's a fun. I enjoy Dark Souls. I enjoyed Bloodborne. I enjoyed all that shit. But I actually wanted to use this. It's my ploy to kind of like hear Rob talk more about writing games. So the article,
the jig is up.
I will give a little bit of context. The article itself is a friendly and an enthusiastic nod to the folks who create these fan theories, either in jest or as a legitimate attempt to tell the actual story of the games. It was also a reminder that Dark Souls 3 is coming out in like a few months. So,
yeah, it's a good hype.
Thanks, guys. But there's a bunch of theories, and some are pretty good, and a lot of people took some creative liberties, I'll say, like doing them in the style of like History Channel documentaries with like kind of warring opinions about what it was. I did notice that there was a thread that like nobody really seemed to explain any of the story, and I've played those games, and I don't really care about the story, so whatever. I think it's interesting. The part that was funny to me is that Namco was like, they're either having this contest to be like, hey, can you guys tell us what the story is? Because we're still curious, and we'll give you $10,000 to do it.
Right. Is this an admittance that they never had a story?
Yeah, that's kind of the way this felt to me. But obviously that's probably a stretch. But I don't know. Any thoughts before we give Rob the floor here a little bit?
No, I want to know.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not even sure I have like a direct question for you here, Rob. But I again, tell me a story.
Let's first talk about Dark Souls.
Sure, sure.
Talk about something that breaks up households.
Oh boy! This sounds like a story. Come on.
No, it's sort of it's more of an anecdote or an observation, I guess. I have friends who've played Dark Souls. So I myself played 20 minutes of the PS3 one, and immediately did like the thing that you can't do that breaks the entire game, which I attacked some vendor who had this giant sword, and I called a friend of mine, and I'm like, I restarted, and he's still coming after me with the sword, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know this guy's important, and I pissed him, and I like, on a sense, that the guy has a memory. He's like, no, you're still an asshole. You just attacked me. Like, I'm still mad at you. But I called a friend of mine who was well into the game, and he was like, no, you need to restart the whole thing. Like, and at which point I was like, cool, yeah. I'm out.
Yeah.
Right. Fuck that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just and I haven't really looked back since. So I have no idea what the fuck is happening in Dark Souls. I do think, but I do my friends that play it. They're like, yeah, I have to, like, my wife needs to be out of town when I play Dark Souls because I turn into a monster. and it's like, I have heard a friend say Dark Souls 2 put a strain on my relationship, and I've learned that I need to, like, step back from it. And I have friends who like, won't touch gin, won't touch Dark Souls. They're like, I've been down that road, and it did not bring me to a good place. So, as to your point about is there a tacit admission, I think that the guys who make those games are really smart. I think they're doing and from what I've seen, I think they know what they're doing, and I think that they know that they are making, in the same way that you design a slot machine for to take money out of people playing slot machines. I think that they're making a game that is about
extracting anger.
It's sort of about like the dopamine cycle that keeps everybody hooked. You know what I mean? And I think they have incredible designers. I mean, I think the worlds are beautiful, and I think that they are smart enough to make it all feel coherent, which is something that story-driven games a lot of times can't do. So, I mean, kudos to them for and the fact that like the story is sort of obfuscated. I mean, one of the rules that we try, or soft rules that sometimes comes up is like when you're playing a game, you can only hold too many things maybe two things in your head, like the number 2 things in your head at one time. And one of them might be like one of those things is the overall like why am I here? And then there are points for story in which you can kind of shift that focus to the story of the game. And then but you're not gonna, or very few games successfully tell somebody a story in the middle of a firefight or in the middle of an intense action thing. And Dark Souls simply says, you know what? We're gonna have you think of one thing, and that thing is death. Yep. The entire time you're playing the game. Like, is something going to come out and jump me? Is something good? Like, what do I need to beat this boss? And, if they were trying to layer in like a really ornate, meaningful story into that, it would be a different game. I mean, it wouldn't be what it is. And I think it's successful for what it is.
I agree. A ton. And I
across the board
those.
Almost. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. But I get, so taking what you just said, and I think you're absolutely right, and I'll agree with you 100% in the sense that like I can honestly say that I played a lot of Dark Souls 1 and 2. Didn't finish either one, but from a design aspect, both on level and character, holy shit. But from a story aspect, do you think a game like Dark Souls would suffer by putting the story, making it less vague and more at the forefront?
I mean, I don't think it'd be the same game. I think that it is very sharpened and honed to do what it's doing, and I think it does it really well. So, I mean, it would become more of the sort of, if you made it more the sort of, Mass Effect, BioWare sort of style RPG, sure. It would just be that, you know what I mean? And I think, especially, given the relatively humble beginnings, I mean, that was not a big budget game.
Nope, not at all.
And I think that they said, okay, cool, we can do, we have the time and resources to do X number of things well. And what's going to delineate us in the marketplace that's crowded enough with this kind of game already? I think they made a pretty smart choice, because it certainly found an audience. And we're, some of us are richer or poorer, depending how you look at it, for that having clicked. I mean, I think it calls into question some larger things about why do people play games. I mean, it's, if you're able, that works for what it is. And so it scratches that itch for the people who want that particular itch scratched. I'd rather play something like Oxenfree personally, or Firewatch, or Gone Home, or whatever, just because I like that story stuff, and those games still find. I mean, I loved Until Dawn, right? And that found plenty of ways to make me scared and surprise me, and do a lot of the things that Dark Souls does in a almost completely narrative-based context, with a little bit of like walking around and jump scares and all that other good stuff. But, But Dark Souls is what it is.
Rob, what do you think specifically about this contest, like the idea of like an obfuscated story and then trying to find, like, challenging the audience to somehow extract or make sense of it?
I mean, I kind of dig it. I mean, to me, it almost is like it almost contextualizes playing the game as, you are a sleuth. You are in playing the game. If you were able to kind of pick up some clues or some consistencies, I'm sure they're there on purpose. I tried to, in being a good guest, watch a couple of those videos, and it just immediately just turned into the like grown up Peanuts, like
that's how I felt.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm like, I definitely. I'm like, and it affirmed my like, I don't think I'm really missing much by not understanding the narrative here, and I don't think that they're really. I don't think that collectively we're really missing much for being given it the way that we're being given it.
Sure. It's like, I appreciate the work that was put into this.
The production value is great. I don't really give a shit about what you're saying.
But I think they do know. I think somebody had a weird dream, or read some books, or thought about something, and probably has some kind of internal moral compass, or creative compass for what is and what isn't appropriate in a Dark Souls game. But I think at the same time, there's probably a bunch of people who are just trying to make really fucking weird shit, right? And and it either fits in that channel or it doesn't. So I'm sure it's kind of an additive process of having a little bit more resources, probably hopefully some more people on the team, hopefully a little bit bigger budget, and the ability to just kind of run with it and make it theirs.
Mm-hmm. I think it's personally, I think it's like a big publicity stunt by them, and I think it's a good publicity stunt because it's getting everybody engaged. But I don't think they care what the story is. There's a new game coming out in a few months, you said?
Yep.
So they're getting everybody riled up for this. Hey, what's the story so far? What do you guys think? Get excited, community, buy our next game. Like, I think it's great for that reason and everything, and it's cool that people are getting really engaged in this. It's just,
I think brass tacks wise, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's more of a promotional like stunt. Yeah, and I think
it was a meeting, and everybody got together and like, how can we maybe promote the game in a more creative way?
Well, I think
they came up with this idea, and
which is cool.
And to Rob's point, I think they're very smart about it, because like, has there ever been a game franchise other than maybe Minecraft or any one of those like sandbox builders where you actually need a wiki to play the game? Because if you're interested in the story, you're not necessarily going to get it from the game unless you're sitting there with a notepad taking notes. Like, you need to go find a wiki to kind of sift through all of the commentary for every single item and kind of start piecing certain like dialogue and cutscenes together to kind of figure out if you're that interested. And if you are, that's great. Like, you're the guy that made that History Channel style video for this contest, and good for you. But
my final takeaway is that I'm actually kind of bummed that we missed the boat a little bit on this, because I would love absolutely love to come up with one where we are just completely fucking off base. We have no idea what we're talking about.
So
we're
there's
just
a
making
knight,
up names and just
kills a big turtle shell monster, and then he finds out that the princess is in another castle, right, guys? Like, I don't
here's
know.
a werewolf dude. Like, you just kind of it's like almost like a bad lip reading of Dark Souls or something.
No, fair enough. All right, good work, everybody. We made it through our 3 main topics. Good job. Let's take a quick break, and before we jump into the lightning round, we'll be right back right after this. So this week marks the launch of our Cheat Codes giveaway. Head on over to cheatcodespodcast.com and you can enter to win one of 5 Gang Beast keys courtesy of Bone Loaf Press. We love this little gem and we're stoked to share it with you. There's a ton of ways to increase your chances of winning, so head on over to cheatcodespodcast.com and check it out. We'll announce winners next week. We'll link to it in the show notes as well, so good luck and happy Gang Beasting. All right, welcome back. All right, panel, it's time for the lightning round. Here's how it works. We're going to take 2 quick topics. We're going to give each member of the panel a minute to chime in uninterrupted for the most part. We've had a couple beers. I can't guarantee anything. At the end of each minute, we will award each panelist. Award? Well, hold on for the finale, guys. We will award the panelists a quantity of some type of points based on nothing in particular. Think whose line is it anyway, that kind of thing. All right, topic number 1. Kane Fulton over at Tech Radar published a recent piece calling for equal treatment in the, in gaming for, of all things, PC gamers. He references the upcoming game, The Division, the new Tom Clancy thing.
Yes.
One of the 30 Tom Clancy games that are coming out in the next few months.
It's supposed to be pretty good.
As the latest in a string of titles that sacrifices graphical quality for the sake of providing console gamers a comparable visual experience. He calls for balance, or more directly, PC ports that take full advantage of users' more powerful rigs. Is this a valid complaint? Are PC gamers getting the short end of the stick? All right, so the way this will work, we're going to have a timer on our end, Rob, and I will give you a chance to go here in a second, but to get a feel for it, we'll have some of the regular panelists here go first, and you'll get an idea of what's happening here, all right?
10-4.
Okay, Mr. Golish.
Oh, yeah? Why'd you choose me?
Because you're directly to my left.
Because he's PC Master Race.
Yeah, because he is absolutely PC Master Race. Give me a minute on how you felt about this article.
On PC? This article was okay. I agree that sometimes I feel like I've been, shortchanged because I've been PC. Like, you get a game that comes out, you get Arkham Knight, and it doesn't even work or something. And that's not necessarily their fault. Like, there's technical difficulties with them trying to get the game out on a PC and all the consoles. It's easier for a console. Everybody has the same console. Everybody has different PCs. So it's obviously more complicated. But when somebody goes and says that they're going to reduce the graphical, the ability for me to increase my graphics because it's unfair to the consoles, I kind of raise my eyebrows. Like, what are you talking about? I paid extra money so I could have better graphics. Like, I guess what's the point? I don't know. Is that?
Are you exceeding your time?
Are you
There are
done?
only 7 seconds left. I don't know.
All right, that's fine.
It's an okay.
No, I'll live with it.
I'd like to give you 3 awards for your minute. For 53 seconds well spent.
It could have been better.
It's all right. Mr. Arroyo, give me a minute.
Next?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Okay. Holy shit, this is tough. I think my biggest problem with this whole thing is the idea of pandering to the minority, because the minority is the guy who spends a hell of a lot of money to upgrade their rig, like Nick over here, so that they can get those graphical, in
bonuses.
Yeah. And that's where just doesn't make sense from a business standpoint to pander to those people. Now, making a game that's broken for them, like Batman, that's a different story. But the idea of saying okay, we're about to make a game, right? It does take work to decide on what things you improve on graphics quality, other than just saying, oh, the textures are HD, right? So at some point, they had to put development power into these things to make the graphics better. So at some point, they have to just cut it off and make it applicable to the console just as much as they do the PC game. So it doesn't make any sense for them to pander to those individuals, I mean, even remotely, in this context. So I don't really see the point.
All right. I think it's a bad argument.
Of course you do.
Well, I honestly do.
I'll give you 3 awards for your minute.
Thanks.
All right. Good job. Rob, how you feeling over there, man?
I'm good, man. Okay, so I mean, this is so I went to college with a college that used Macs. So I've been a Mac person since like the mid 90s. So not knowing too much about actually what it means and what the expectations are to be a PC gamer, what I will say is 2 things. So first of all, like in terms of workflow, when you are making a game, traditionally what you do, or my understanding of how this works, is that you make high poly assets. You make high textured assets. You make the pristine, like amazing, Pixar movie looking version, and then you get those into your engine and you optimize. So the argument that like it isn't, making the PC port, there are a whole bunch of things I'm leaving out of this, but like from an art asset perspective, like making a PC game shouldn't be that hard. The reason why I think, and I'm sure I think this came up in the article as well, like PC gamers aren't necessarily a minority when you take piracy into effect. So like the conversion rate on sales for most PC games is something like less than 10%, like 7% or something like that. Because of the way that multiplayer works, the companies making PC games, they can see how many people are trying to log into the servers to play the game. And there are umpteen millions more people who have not paid for these games than have paid for these games. So, I mean, really what I see here is just it's a reaction to piracy, which is, unfortunately widespread. I wish that there were ways that both publishers and users could kind of like, try before you buy, it's 2 hours to sell back on Steam, whatever it is. I wish it were easier for people to kind of taste the apple before they decide whether or not it's rotten. And that model I think can and will change. But for the time being, like, people pirate games because they don't know if they're worth $60. And then if they like it, they're like, well, most of those people go, I'm not going to pay for $60 for something I got working right now. And, I'm not blaming them. But piracy is, and tell me when I'm out of time.
You've been out of time for a while, but I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah,
so.
Rats, DQ. So I think piracy is what's driving this kind of thing, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm going to give you 10 awards.
I'm just going
to use that reference. 10 awards. I think you're right. I think piracy has a big deal. I also agree to a certain extent that when you're developing a game, you are traditionally developing PC style first, and then you kind of like start dealing with. I'm just agreeing with our guest. Don't give me motions in the background.
Save it for your minute,
all right,
sir.
So the only thing I will say before I start a minute is that the guest will traditionally reward me points after I give my minute. So it's up to you, Rob, to reward me after my minute. All right. Here we go.
For it.
The easy answer to this is like everybody shut the fuck up, because PC gaming and console gaming are yes, they're different, but at the same time, like, let's just play shit and have fun. Like, I don't care. If you spend a bunch of money on your PC and you get upset about the fact that games get dumbed down because they get developed with more priority for console, despite being developed for PC first and then eventually ported back to PC after a console release, I don't know what to tell you other than stop pre-ordering shit, stop spending a bunch of money on stuff that looks fine at 30 frames per second and is just as playable, unless you're Arkham Knight, I guess, for the sake of this conversation. But I think ultimately there's nothing wrong with being a PC gamer that spends a lot of money to make everything look really great, and I understand a certain amount of that frustration. But let's all get the fuck over ourselves, because making games and playing games is a fucking privilege, and maybe we should just treat it as such. It's okay to be passionate about things. It's okay to be really cool. Guys spend a bunch of money on muscle cars. Women spend a bunch of money on hair and nails and taking care of their children and shit. However, I want everybody to understand the games are meant to be fun, so let's just keep having fun. So,
Rob, you can award him points, and also just keep in mind he went over in his minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I really can't. The can't call the kettle black on that one. I'm gonna give that. I'm gonna give that 6 hell yes and a right on.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, games are a privilege. I mean, and they're supposed to be fun. At the same time, I do feel for the people who are making a more significant investment and feel like that they should be able to maximize that investment and that time. And and if you spend time on a rig, building a rig so that you can have like crazy 4K, beautiful, gorgeous stuff. It's a bummer that there are systems in place that keep you from being able to get that. and in some cases it's the audience, which goes back to your point. Like, if we become better consumers, I think we'll have better product.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you for echoing my statements, and thank you for your generous reward. No, I am legitimately saying thank you. Like I
want to thank you for saying it more elegantly than Joe Erskine did.
You should just be the host of the show, apparently, Rob. In the interest of time, we're going to get on to our last topic here. We're going to bang it out real quick, and we'll get on with our lives. And you can too, listener. But here we go. Last lightning round topic. In the time when the most recent Super Bowl. I'm sorry. In time with the most recent Super Bowl.
Good job.
Which was last weekend. Broncos won. Spoilers, everybody. VentureBeat posted an article asking if esports or the NFL was a better career path. Obviously, the odds are against anyone making the call here or even achieving a dream like this. When you start breaking it down to brass tacks, things get real complicated real quick. And we're talking about, single-digit percentages of people that start playing something, whether it be a sport or an esport, and then make a professional career out of it. But the effort to make these dreams a reality is obviously very intense. So if you have to choose, which would you rather be? And is it a fair comparison to make in the first place? I'm curious. I've been kind of dying to hear this all day, and I am very, very much anticipating this next minute. So I'm going to give it to Mr. Arroyo, who read this article with a dripping, like sopping sponge of disdain, just like coming down. Like it was amazing. I am curious if you can answer these questions, but also get some of your thoughts across in 60 seconds. Go. I
don't think I can. I'm gonna start out by saying I'm a fan of low expectations, so that was fucked up. And this article made me just beyond absolutely angry. Like I can't even. You take the chief editor, right, or the editor in chief rather of VentureBeat, the new one rather. He writes an article that's also full of mistakes. Someone needed to edit his piece and have him write about something he doesn't understand, which is esports and games, because he referred to the sport as games. Like he was like, take the thing that all the kids like, and that's a sport, and it's games. And I'm like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. And then he not only compares it to the NFL to get Super Bowl click grabs, instead of comparing it to all of sports, because if esports is electronic sports, then how can you say like my esports career is versus my NFL career? Why don't you just only compare it to the WWE, for fuck's sake? That doesn't make any sense. None of it made any sense. I read the whole thing and every single paragraph made me more angry than the last.
I believe the question was, which would you rather?
No, there's no question in lightning rounds. Just anger.
Your pasión gets me very amped up, so I'm going to give you 12 awards for your amazing rendition of how aggravating. Si, senor. Mr. Golish. No, you don't want this? I'll go then.
All right,
I'll go.
Go first.
All right. I don't. Yes, I agree with Mr. Arroyo in the sense that there were some glaring oversights in the commentary and grammar and punctuation in this article, and I think I'm just going to break it down to this: do I have to choose between being an NFL player or an esports athlete, a professional one? Based on a money game, right now, based on the numbers, it sounds like it's more profitable to be an NFL player. However, a bit harder to be to get into that demographic rather than an esports player. That being said, I think I'd still prefer to have carpal tunnel versus concussion that develops into Parkinson's disease. So as much as I love football, I do enjoy football quite a bit. I'm not totally on board with esports yet, but I love how much it's being legitimized lately and becoming kind of a real thing. I think I might go with esports player as opposed to being an NFL athlete. So
Rob, he answered the question that he asked, so that's kind of nice.
I'm going to give him 3 first downs and a South Korean StarCraft 2 championship.
But we're not going to argue about which one is better, right?
Like exactly. Yeah.
Value is arbitrary. It's fine.
That's what I can say.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to let our guest go last. So, Golish, you get to go now. There's a lot of goes on it.
Go.
Yeah,
Okay.
go stuff.
Go.
So would I rather be esports or football? I guess.
That's basically.
Or
whatever. Else
would I
you wanna
rather
say.
video game or football? Says Joe. I guess the answer would. Shit, I don't know. Like they both sound like a lot of work. Honestly. I don't know. Like if I were in football, I could run a 40-meter like in no time flat. But if I was in esports, I don't have to get a concussion, like you said, also. So I don't know. It's a tough decision. They both pay really well. I guess esports, they pay the best championships round out of any sport. But I don't know. I don't know how hard it is actually. It's fucking really hard, I guess, because they give tuition and stuff, or you get scholarships for these kind of things. So. Shit.
You got 5 seconds.
I won't choose esports because I can't use my G13 probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
That'd be cheating.
Well, I don't know. It's basically a keyboard, but it's just differently shaped.
How many G13s do you give him for this one?
Yeah.
I'll give you all the G13s you need.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
13 of them.
I'll give you 13 G13s. How was that, Mr. Auten? For our final minute of the day and to close out the show. Talk to me about how you would rather be an NFL player or an esports athlete,
Or not.
or nothing of the above, and you have 60 seconds to spend as you please.
Two things I know nothing about: esports and football.
I love it.
So, great, there we go. I mean, can I be a football player who doesn't play very much? Is there some kind of like ancillary role?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's called a kicker.
Long snapper.
yeah, exactly. So that actually sounds pretty good. I think the lifestyle of football. I mean, you know, jets, hanging out. Activity. Feeling healthy, vitamins, having a doctor tell me how to do shit all the time. I mean, that all sounds pretty cool. That part of it, like professional athlete. I mean, we're just assuming that me and the body I have today, am suddenly a football player, which does certainly not benefit me or the sport of football. But I mean, if I compare that to 10,000 hours in a basement, and doing my macros and all that stuff. I mean, if we're putting it video gaming versus football, I gotta go. I love the video games. I can't get away from them. It's what I do. But I mean, if we're just casting me in the role of when one of these two champions and how did I get there? If I can be the football player who doesn't get fucked with all that much, I might pick that one.
Okay. Well, all right.
Second string quarterback for the win.
Third
Third
right?
string.
Third
Yeah, third string.
First of all, I'm gonna give you another 10 awards for only being 3 seconds over your minute. And secondly, I think you came to a very rational and sane conclusion. And I liked how you took us on a journey of we're just assuming that I'm a champion at both, and which one do I just choose? So it was all right. I get it.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir, very much. I think we're almost done here. Episode 84 is essentially a wrap. Rob, thank you for taking the time, man. And
yeah, guys. No, pleasure.
We had a lot of fun talking to you. A lot of good insight, a lot of good stories. Before we go, let the folks know where they can check out your work, or do you have a repository or a portfolio, or where they can stalk you on Twitter? I mean, or you can just tell us to go fuck ourselves. That's fine too.
Yeah, no, I don't really. I'm a bad repo man. But yeah, no, if anybody has any questions or anything, I'm always happy to chat on Twitter at Rob Auten, ROBAUTEN, and otherwise, look forward to seeing you guys again soon sometime, I hope.
Oh, absolutely, man.
Cool.
I will most likely be in touch in the coming months, man. Thank you so much.
Sounds good.
Thank you for being here, dear listener, and know that we're always curious to hear what you think. So please hit us up, cheatcodespodcast.com, Facebook, Twitter. Get in on the conversation. Stay tuned for a new episode coming next week, and make sure you check out the giveaways, too. We brought them back, so go get some free games and or swag. We're offering it up, so it's up to you to come and get it. Enjoy with our compliments. Play it, Sam. Play it. We'll see you next week. Steam keys. Steam. Steam.